supervising landscape architect with the Public Works Department. I'm joined by Kristen Kelleher with Public Works, our Community Relations Manager. And then Gary, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. My name is Gary Chan. I'm a neighborhood planner with the Community Development Department.
We also have Courtney Kirk. Courtney?
Hi, I'm Courtney Kirk, the Senior Landscape Architect in Community Planning.
From Human Services and Programs, Adam Corbeil couldn't be with us here tonight, but Sue Walsh is here.
Hi, I'm Sue Walsh. I'm the Assistant Director for Adult and Family Services for the Department of Human Service Programs.
And Lillian Sue, the Director of Public Art with the Cambridge Arts Commission, isn't here tonight, but she is another part of the city team. And then Cassie, can you introduce your team?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cassie Bethany. I'm a landscape architect and project manager here at Weston Sampson, supporting you all in the city on this project. And Sherry Ruane is here as well.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry, I meant to say Sherry Ruane, and she's our principal in charge and director of design at in our office.
All right.
Sorry, I thought you were going to say hello.
So for Zoom tonight, this is a webinar, so microphones and videos are disabled. When we get to the participation section, we can't unmute people for comment. We ask that people refrain from using the chat function or the Q&A while we're going through the presentation. I think our presentation's relatively short. I think it's about a half hour, so we have plenty of time for people to make comments and ask questions. If anyone is having any kind of Zoom technical questions or issues, you can reach out to my email address that's shown here. We've also provided phone information for those looking at this presentation that they found on the project page. And again, let you know that we are recording this meeting tonight, and it will be made available on the project page website. So those folks that weren't able to join us tonight will be able to listen to the presentation at a later time. Next slide. All right, so now I will turn it over to Cassie.
Thanks, Kevin. And actually, Sherry's going to head us off as our principal in charge and share just our experience and feeling about Danehy Park so far.
Thanks, Cassie. Well, anybody that's even seen Danehy Park from afar knows what an amazing asset it is. And we've sort of adopted this thought process that Danehy Park is a neighborhood park for everyday needs, as well as a venue for big day annual events, which it certainly is. Next. And we recognize that it's truly a gem in the midst of a very densely populated city and region, with long sweeping views that are very hard to come by. And in this case, you can see existing shade trees, evergreen trees, with pathways that wind through active and passive recreation, which really is such a gift for so many. Next. Speaking of active recreation, this is just one snip of what happens in that park at all times of the day, formal and informal, permitted and pickup. And for those of you that have watched the Open Space film, which is sort of a documentary on Danehy Park, there's some great captures of what happens there, and that team that created that movie is actually on the working group for this project. Next. And there are obviously here events. This in this case is an evening concert in the summer, which is this idyllic setting, and you can see that it really brings a community together. It's not only for local families, but also regionally. The surrounding community, I think, also feels some level of maybe adjacent ownership to Danehy just because of all that it can offer. Next. And Danehy is host to a lot of community building events. This is where neighbors meet each other. It's where families come together. It's where kids and classmates see each other and can engage with the recreation department and other departments in a really meaningful way that creates really long-lasting identifying connections to this really important space. Next. Danehy also has the benefit of having public art integrated throughout in large ways and in small. And it really enables park users to think about the landscape and the park differently. And this is just one example of art, but they are really throughout the park. There's, I think, 3 different examples of art in the Universal Design Playground. So it's really been a priority, not only for the city, but for the park to ensure that that is integral. Next. And this is an image of the Miyake forest that was installed. And this is an example of how Danehy Park can really be sort of a living laboratory where ecology strategies like this one can be tested and understand how these interventions can improve diversity of species and create really resilient landscapes. Next. And here, obviously, there's lots of road races. You know, Danehy Park is good if people are smiling while they're running. I never smile while I run, so clearly this is an amazing location. But it's really a spot where people gravitate to and feels a lot like a really integral part of their lives. Next. And this is that Universal Design Playground I mentioned. This is actually an image that I took. The woman on the carousel is actually 94 years old. She's in a wheelchair, and that is her caretaker pushing her around at a really sort of ideal pace in my experience. And she's just taking in the entire landscape of kids playing, you know, being amongst native species. And it was really remarkable to see how Danehy Park is truly a multi-generational open space that serves an incredibly vast cross-section of residents and visitors alike. Next. Cassie, you can take it away.
Thanks. So we have been really in this investigatory, inventorying, observational phase of work so far. And we wanted to come to this community meeting with some tangible information to set the stage for this conversation. But really, we're here to hear your thoughts. This is a listening session, and we're really excited to get started with the community. So we have been boots on the ground for the last 6 months or so. We have been observing how people use this park day to day, how they use this park during events, what needs there are, what deficiencies there are, where amenities are distributed across the park itself. And we're looking at 50 acres, and we're just the actual inventorying of where benches are and where parking is and how many spaces there are. All of that groundwork was done over the last 6 months. And this is just one example of many mapping exercises of analysis that we've undergone so far. And we've collected a lot of great data. We're forming some opinions of our own, and we're looking to you all to share with us your thoughts as well. Just to take it back a little bit, Danehy Park is a unique site, to say the least. It was not always a park. It only started being a park in 1990. Before that, it was a brick making site where brick clay was excavated starting in the mid 1800s. That operation lasted until 1952. And at that point, it transitioned over to become the city dump. And that was in an operation for just under 20 years. That work sets the stage for some of the considerations and challenges that we need to take into account when we're developing new ideas and starting to make improvements at Danehy Park. In the 70s and 80s, all of the soils that were taken up by the Red Line tunnel excavation were disposed of at Danehy Park. And so we'll get into it in a moment, but the topography that you see out there is a direct link to this site history. And then after that disposal work was completed, there was an improvement plan created for the park, and improvements were slowly made over the next several years and into the present time. And it started to operate as a park in 1990. So the park itself is, I believe it's the tallest point in Cambridge where you can get these sweeping views. The redmost point in the center of the park, that's where that image of the artwork that Sherry had showed before was taken from. That you're at elevation 47 above sea level. And then as you go down to your cooler colors, your yellows and greens and blues around the edges, you're down to elevation 3, elevation 5 in some places. So the edges are much lower. We're looking at a change of topography over 44 feet plus or minus across the site and across the park in various ways. And that creates some really amazing opportunities, like the sledding hill that goes into the wetlands area in the northwest corner, but it also creates some challenges around accessibility that this project and this planning effort really is an opportunity to think creatively about. And so in this example, the sledding hill, we're up at about 41 above sea level and down to about 10 on the right side of this image, above sea level, elevation 10. And so that grade change, it's significant. It's an opportunity. It just really exemplifies this strata that we're working with here at Danehy. And so the landfill itself has some unique characteristics that we need to take into account. This park, I believe it was the first landfill that became a park, and it was actually predates the state's regulations around landfills, and so it's important that we work carefully with any of our improvements. Our team at Weston Sampson has firsthand knowledge of what it takes, having constructed the universal design playground, in the management of that. And I know the city works closely with other consultants to make sure that the management of the subgrade conditions are in good stead, I guess I'd say. The city is monitoring the methane that may be released through that landfill as well. And so any work that we do has to take into account what the conditions are underground, what the results of that work will be, etc. There are a few other considerations that we just want to set the stage for and make sure that we understand, what's going under discussion for improvement, what may need to or want to stay in place. We feel strongly that the athletic fields as they are going to remain in place. The orientation of that, perhaps the improvement of those is under discussion. And so we'd love to see, what tweaks, what spectators see, what the edges are, what the connections are to those sports fields could be, but the actual location of those fields will remain through this process. And then we also, the tree cover on a landfill is just amazing. So the trees will be protected and cared for through this process. We've done quite a deep dive in the inventorying of all of those trees. The city has great information, but what's invasive, what's not helping, what's helping, what kind of sunshade cover, meaning where are there areas of deep shade that are really amazing for cooling off or other activities that might want shade. What are areas that are full sun? And balancing that throughout the site and having a range of opportunities for enjoyment. So all of these things we're taking into account. I also mentioned earlier the wetlands in the northeast corner. That's actually was constructed. It's man-made, but it's now a jurisdictional wetlands, and we want to celebrate it. It's great, and we actually would love to lean into all of the ecology that is budding, pun intended, I don't know, in this space. So we have some great bones from an ecological perspective. And of course, Sherry mentioned the Miyake Forest as well. And then art was discussed a bit. The art program at Danehy is pretty fantastic. It's unique. It has, it's a quite a significant program. I think we have 8. We actually had to go to 2 pages because the Universal Design site playground itself has so much art and murals, and so we would love to really lean into the art at Danehy, strengthen that program, make sure it feels cohesive, help any pieces that need a little bit of love, or are otherwise need support. So the art program, we'd really love to understand that better from a community's perspective, what they love, what they want to see more of. There are a few very obvious kind of system-wide items that we know need to be taken into account with any improvements. Across the board, drainage is a real concern. If you walk out there, especially in the east-west pathway, the main corridor through the park, you can see actual literal trenches of streams that are created and divots that are fairly unsafe. So we do want to take a systems-wide approach and come up with a strategy that will help fix some of these drainage issues that have been occurring over time. Likewise, accessibility is a top consideration as we move forward. We've gone through and evaluated all of the slopes, all of the pathways, their actual condition as well, and identified areas where we are exceeding beyond the state standards for accessibility. So the state code for nice, gentle pathways that exceeds 5% slope. And then we've also gone a step further to where are we getting close and where might we be out of that compliance pretty soon. And so this is an opportunity to not have a band-aid approach, but actually integrate a creative solution around some of these accessibility challenges. And while the topography is amazing and great, and there's absolute opportunity with that, there's also challenges with having that amount of topography that we want to account for as we make design choices here. And then finally, the inventory, the amenities themselves, the benches, the trash receptacles, the directional signage, the fences, the entrances as well. How do those make a place ultimately? The cohesion of those is important. So when you walk into Danehy Park at any place, do you feel like you're entering into the park? Sometimes it's a little bit questionable. It may be a little bit confusing. Sometimes you're walking through a parking lot to get into the park proper. So cleaning up and clarifying and having really an overall systems-wide approach to the park and its brand through its site features, I think will bring a lot of connection and cohesiveness to the space overall. So considerations aside, there's also so much going on at Danehy Park from beyond just its use, but planning projects and construction projects. So just to remind or let folks know, there's several, there's a track and turf field replacement project happening. There's a pavilion building and parking lot up on New Street project that will be underway shortly. There's considerations for a new salt shed, and that's in the very early planning stages. There's a new street multi-use path project as well, and then a pedestrian bike bridge over the Fitchburg line tracks as well. That would be a boon for connectivity across the tracks themselves. And if you would like to learn more about any of these, there's information on the city's website in various locations. And Kevin, of course, is a great resource as well for those questions, and he'll have his information up at the end. So I'll pass it back to Kevin to set the stage on the community process, and then you'll hear back from me in a moment.
Thanks, Cassie. So this project schedule is showing kind of the big picture. When we started back in, late last year, we started with the community survey, and the top and kind of the blue color scheme is the community outreach, community involvement component of the project. Below is what city staff and the Weston and Sampson team as far as developing this master plan. And in the next couple of slides, I'll go into a little bit more detail with both of those. Next slide, please. So as far as developing the master plan, we've really completed the inventory and analysis section. So now we're looking at the visioning section where we're developing ideas, making recommendations for specific areas within the park. So in those fall, one of the ways we're thinking about it is kind of from three different perspectives: programming, or what kinds of activities happen in different areas of the park; the infrastructure within the park. A lot of times that's the type of thing that you don't really focus on unless there's a problem with it, but it's very much a focus of ours in this project. And then we're also thinking about design character. And as we move forward over the summer and into the fall, what we really want to do is develop a shared vision for the park with input from community and working groups. And then once we're through that, we'll summarize all those findings in a final report that we'll present back to the community again for kind of final input. Next slide. So from community engagement standpoint, we have done a survey back for, it was running from last December to February. We got a lot of great responses. I think there were over 700 responses that had exceeded our expectations. So it was really some fantastic feedback that we got from that. We've attended a couple of events in the past, and we recently kicked off our working group earlier in the month. The working group is part of our engagement strategy, but just one part of it. So we're going to be working with this group. This is a group of 15 residents, and we're going to be meeting with them approximately monthly. Our next meeting with them is coming up later in July, and we're going to be focusing at that meeting with the working group, which will be a public meeting that everyone is welcome to attend. And we're really going to be talking about engagement strategies at that meeting, and we're going to put a particular focus on what we can do to reach folks that we don't typically hear from, the typically underrepresented parts of the city. Over the summer, we're planning on being present at a lot of pop-up events and community meetings and other outreach activities. And then in the fall, we'll have another community meeting to summarize what we've learned. And I think at that meeting, we'll also have some initial but more specific ideas of what some potential improvements could be at the park to get your feedback on. Next slide. I'll turn it over to Cassie for this one.
Yeah, so out of the events that we've attended and the online survey, we pulled together a graphic of what we've heard so far. And our support on this has been Civic Space Collaborative, who's been helping to be out there with us along with Weston Sampson, the city. But we really just wanted to meet people where they are. Like if you're going to a community event, that's and you have your kids with you and your family, that's kind of where we want to be. We want to try to get as wide range of voices as possible. So let your friends know that we'll be out in the summer. but we actually had almost 1,000 online responses. The survey was in 9 languages, was open for about 3 months. People love at Danehy Park the open space and access to nature. Sherry said it at the top, it's in a dense urban city. Having this asset is just fantastic. People love Danehy for its organized and pickup sports opportunities, the walking and biking paths throughout, connecting with their community members. And I mean, for the amount of times I've always seen a gathering, a family gathering, a reunion, a birthday party, it's pretty incredible to see all of the gathering that's happening at Danehy. The size of it itself is pretty fantastic in its location, being really within the heart of the city, and the diversity of people there in the kinds of spaces that are being used. People want to see a few things at Danehy Park. They'd love to see upgraded sports and play infrastructure, adding an indoor sports or community center, adding more trees and more seating, more bathrooms, and you're not alone. We hear this with any park and playground. It's these much needed amenities are important to make sure that these parks are usable for longer periods of time. Lighting is a critical item, making sure it's safe to walk through at night. Improved drainage, obviously we talked about that one already. Better signage, so knowing how to get from A to B within to and outside of the park itself. And then more events, so more gathering and more opportunities for connection. Most of the folks who responded to the survey were coming from the local area around Danehy Park, so North Cambridge, Neighborhood 9, and West Cambridge. People were, about half of the respondents were middle-aged, between 35 and 54. People love soccer Saturdays. We just pulled a few quotes that we felt were emblematic of the kinds of input that we were seeing. And kind of the accessibility of the space itself and getting out to play. We also went to 2 events to table really and just get some ad hoc feedback. So people want to see more trees in the dog friendly area or rewilding. So we could, are there places where we can carve out opportunities for plants and not just people? Some added amenities, perhaps around adding a parkour, adding benches, improving the track itself. Signage came up quite a bit, drainage again. So we're seeing some common themes here already. And we of course want to hear your thoughts tonight. And so we've started to formulate these preliminary project themes, and this is an opportunity to check that out. Are we on track? What are we missing? So we'll just run through a few of those and then we'll open it up for discussion. So what we've heard and seen is that Danehy Park really deserves high quality social spaces. And I hope I'm not jumping, I hope I'm not jumping around here on my connection. But high quality social spaces is of paramount. And, are they larger or smaller? That they might feel different across the board, but, creating different kinds of spaces that people can gather. What a theme could be formed around casual play that isn't necessarily a sports field or a playground, but it's someplace that you can go bring your grandparent with you or your caregiver and you can pick up a game and play, and it's not necessarily a traditional sport. And then on the flip side of that, really creating strong amenities around our sports and organized play. So spots for seating and accessibility to get to these places, team benches, and fencing that keeps the balls where we want them and keeps them out of where we don't want them. We've been thinking about this idea of open play. So kind of breaking out of the beyond the traditional play equipment. So can play transcend its traditional age groups and serve this multi-generational need? Can you go out there with your grandparent or your littlest child and have a really unique and fantastic experience at Danehy Park? We also want to make sure that any improvement really mitigates urban heat islands and leads into climate resiliency goals that the city has set forward. And so we planting selection and native species and so on. We also are doing an inventory of all wildlife that lives at Danehy Park currently and actually leaning into that. So we want to enhance the ecology that's out there, make it better, make it function as best as it can be. That I've just talked about, but really the ask here is, what themes are we missing? What did I not touch upon? What would you like to see? That's a big question. And I believe, is there a poll that's popping up where folks can write in?
Is it not up now?
No. Oh, I didn't know if I wasn't, but
I don't see it.
We might have to just read them. I think it's because we did the poll in the practice session.
okay.
Yeah, we can just read it aloud.
How about now?
No.
Okay, so do folks have access to the chat and can write in their thoughts there on what might be missing? Okay. So just as we open it up for discussion, just keep that in the back of your mind. And then please ask any questions you have about Danehy Park. What was confusing about what we presented, what is coming to the forefront with the information we presented as well. We're open for any questions, of course. And then I'll hand it back to Kevin about the call to action for tonight.
Thanks, Cassie. For those of you who are watching this recording after the fact, there are a couple of ways you can get in touch with us with any questions or comments. You can visit the project page link that's shown on this page to reach out to us, or you can email me directly at the email address that's shown here. But I think at this point, we are going to end the recording, and then we're gonna engage with the audience that's here with us tonight. Looks like we're still recording at the moment.